Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with our driver media availabilities today. We are joined by Denny Hamlin, driver of the number 11, FedEx Freight Toyota. We'll go ahead and open it up to questions. Please state your name and your affiliation. Raise your hand and we'll get a wireless mic to you. Start up here with Mike.
Mike Hembry, NBC Sports. Denny, has everything there is to know about this car essentially been learned from the basic platform and so forth going into the playoffs, or do you still need to know even more about it?
No, I think we've learned quite a bit in the first, 2/3 of the season or whatever the number might be. But I think certainly we know a lot more, and certainly after we've gone through all these tracks now, different types. We've seen trends from certain types of tracks. We've got a good understanding of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can always kind of fix what we want to fix because of the rules and the tolerances being so tight.
Okay, we'll go over here to Lee.
I'm just kind of curious, how concerned are you about Kurt Busch at this point? Because, it's one thing for it to be 1 week or 2 weeks, but now it's, starting to be reoccurrent.
Yeah, I mean, it's concerning for sure. Mostly concerning for his health, not really for the race team. We want to give him all the time he needs, and, this is proof that he's doing right by his body and making sure he's back to 100%. I think that other drivers maybe in the past maybe would have just kind of been able to get some tests passed and gone out there and race, but he wants to be 100% because it's just, no one race or season or whatever might be as important as your overall health in the long term.
And as far as going to Watkins Glen next week, we've said for a long time there aren't ringers anymore because you guys have all become so proficient at road course running, but when you're in the field with a guy like Kimi Räikkönen, how does that kind of, change the dynamic of the race?
It doesn't change the dynamic of the race, I don't think, unless it does. I mean, I think that, it's a great opportunity for him and Trackhouse and whatnot, but as far as like being a contender to like race for the win, I don't think that's a possibility. Just simply because it does take time. It does, it's just if you look at the people that have been successful in stock cars coming from an open wheel background, it takes a long time. Other than you got these anomalies like Tony Stewart and a few others. Montoya took a little bit of time, but it's just really difficult because everyone has gotten so much better, and especially with the information, the data that they've got nowadays, all the drivers that are in the field now have really stepped up dramatically. So I think it's a good thing for our sport if it gets some good publicity. But other than that, I'm not really sure that it changes the dynamic of the race too much.
Okay, we'll come up to Bob, Nate, and then Reed.
Bob Pockers, Fox Sports, kind of following up on what Lee asked. I mean, I know Kurt has been at the kind of the command center and has been engaged, but is there any concern or is there any thought that like he might not be able to come back, and do you have to start thinking about next year at all in the 45?
I mean, we're always thinking about it. We're as forward thinking as you can possibly be as a race team. But ultimately we're not, and we can't rush Kurt's health. But we always are trying to come up with contingency plans based off of any other scenario that might get thrown our way.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Kind of following up on that, Denny, can you evaluate how Ty Gibbs has performed in that car, and has that taken a little bit of pressure off of you guys, knowing that he's kind of an adequate fill-in? I presume, is he sort of like, as long as Kurt's out, is he going to be the go-to guy?
I believe so, but I think he's done a good job for us for sure. I think that I think he certainly realizes this. The fence between Xfinity and Cup is a big old tall one. These guys over here don't mess around too much, and so it's tough. And so Ty, I think has done really good considering of what we've asked him to do, and that's keep his nose clean, keep that 45 car in a good position in the owners' playoffs. That's really important for us financially. So it's important, and he's really done a good job for us to do that. And then he took a fast car last week. Obviously, made a mistake late in that race, but he took it and he maximized his day. So I think he did a really good job, and certainly we're happy with the job he's been doing for us thus far.
And then going back to the April race here, where I think it was just you and Harvick were the only two that made 2 stops in that final stage, and you caught and beat Byron. Do you expect more teams will be on that strategy, or do you think people can still play the game of if there's a caution, that strategy is probably not going to work, right?
Yeah, it just depends whether the fall off is the same. Ultimately, computer programs are going to tell the true story, or whether it's the right thing to do or not. But if the fall off is less this time, then 2 stops won't work because they'll be farther out. They won't drop off as far in the long run. It just kind of depends on how the race is playing out, what the strategy is, who's up front, when that's happening. All that is part of a program that makes it so hard for us to do with pen and paper nowadays like we used to do. There's so many factors that play into it. Certainly there was a time where in that last stage, if a caution comes at any point, either they would have been in big trouble or we would have been in big trouble. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there of what's the right strategy, and it worked out the way it did. It didn't necessarily mean that the one-stop strategy was the wrong one.
Okay, over here to Reed.
Reed Spencer with NASCAR Wire. And looking over the history of Richmond, very seldom do you get an unusual or a surprise winner here. What is it about this track that seems to favor the elite veteran drivers over anybody else?
Yeah, just knowing what you need to feel here in practice versus what you race is something that knowledge certainly plays a factor in, and experience plays a factor in. I know specifically when I go out there today, I'm going to look for a certain type of feel. My car needs to work a certain way in the certain part of the corner for me to know whether it's a race-winning car or not. Those are things that younger guys with not enough experience don't necessarily have. But sometimes you have a young driver with an experienced team that gives them the foresight to look for those things, and that's where you see some of the young guys like Byron, even though he's not a rookie by any means, latches right on and is a contender to win like he was in the spring.
Okay, we'll come up here to Jordan.
Jordan Bianchi, The Athletic. Kind of looking at the playoff scenario, if Kurt's not in a position where he needs to be in the car at Daytona, but he is healthy enough to race, is it something considering keeping him out of that race car just because it's Daytona and there's no need to be him in a super speedway race?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what the protocols will be on that once he's cleared, whether he continues to get waivers even if he is cleared. I'm really not sure, to be honest with you. Right. Yes, a great idea. We might use that. Thanks.
Okay, come on. Go back here and then up front.
Hi, I'm Darren, right here.
Yep.
Darren Snyder at Black Door Ventures. I was wondering, I was at the Bubba's block party on Thursday, and I was wondering if you had heard anything about it, what you thought about it going in, and what you think about it now that it's gone and passed.
Yeah, we're going to debrief as a team on it next Wednesday. But, being part of the NASCAR Diversity Council, I'm on that board as well. That's something that they've been planning for quite a long time, and certainly something that we've had our hands in. And it sounds like that it went really, really well. I know that they had to cap the amount of people that were coming at a certain amount, which is a very good thing, that there was an increased interest there. It's all about just trying to broaden our audience at this racetrack, on television, everything, and open up our sport to some that may not know anything about it. So anytime you can kind of mix NASCAR racing and pop culture, it's all really a good thing for us. And I think that we see it week in, week out in our stands nowadays, that our fans and our audience is more diverse than it's ever been.
Come up front and then over to Lee.
Denny, you grew up around here. Is the emotion of the home court really a thing, or is it just something we media types like to write about?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that certainly I feel it from within. When I run bad here, I feel it a little bit harder than I do on any other type of racetrack because like I talked about it, I know what I really need to feel at this track, and it's very frustrating when I can't get my car to do those things. And so it's just part of it. So certainly I would say I always feel more pressure coming to this racetrack in general. Martinsville is probably a very, very close number 2. But it doesn't always mean you're going to have success, even though you know what you need. Sometimes it depends on where your race team's at the time. There's a lot of factors that goes into it, but certainly the emotion is very high at a racetrack like this versus others.
Okay, over here to Lee.
Just kind of curious with the Bubba announcement this week, 4 straight top 10 finishes, more than anybody else in the last month. Was there something that you saw in him that made you think that he has turned the corner? I mean, certainly the performance has been there over the last month, but is there something even more specific that we might not be seeing, with our eyes that you're kind of dialed in on?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we live and breathe it every day at 2311. We see where he's progressed, even though results, typically you guys have to hyper focus on, you try to focus on 36 different drivers, right? We focus on our 2, so we know where they are getting better and where they're not. And so we try to put those numbers and analytics in front of our drivers to see how they can improve in certain positions. And I think that certainly Bubba has taken a giant step. And even though at the beginning of the year results, we honestly, it's well documented that I said that I felt we were holding Bubba back at the beginning of the year with kind of mistakes on pit road. I think that we've gotten that better. Joe Gibbs Racing has helped us get that better. And then on top of that, he's continued to work on his game, because ultimately, it is sometimes convenient when you always have an out that, it's the pit crew or a certain part of the team is what's holding me back from performing. Well, you always have to be, as a professional, prepared for the moment that nothing else is holding you back. And are you ready to step up to the plate when everything is going your way and your cars are fast and your pit crew's great? You have to be ready for those moments, and I think that he continued to work, even though publicly he didn't handle things the way I loved it, but he continued to put his nose down and continue to work on his craft, and that's what's showing up now.
The booth was saying that there's something to learning how to race up front. Would you agree with that? Because you've always been in really great equipment since you got to top.
Yeah, and that's kind of why it's tough, with kind of the emotion he showed last week, and that, he felt like he let the team down. He should have won. It's hard to beat these guys each and every week, and he is racing against a crop of drivers that he hasn't raced with for the first handful of years of his career. So it is more difficult to execute and beat them. And so nothing's a given. You have to have all the pieces of the puzzle put together to win these races. The 4 team proved that great. They've just been chipping away over the last month or so. Their performance has been getting better. And then bam, they had one good break with that caution, and then they capitalized. And so that's all of it that you have to put together. And but to their credit, they put themselves in position to do that. They were running up front when that happened. So that's the things that, it's not always a given just because you have a fast car that you're going to win races. You still have to have it all. And so that's why it's, we view last week as certainly a success, because it was, like Loudon, one of the more, put together weekends that 23 car has had from top to bottom, from practice, qualifying, and race. And so that's what we're hoping to see. And we've seen it twice now, at least in the last couple months. So those are all good trends that are heading our direction. And I believe that this is probably the Bubba Wallace that is here to stay, for sure.
Okay, we'll wrap up here with Bob.
Bob Pockris, Fox Sports. If you had announced or gotten done the Bubba extension a month ago, people would say, well, what has he done? You do it this week, and he can say, well, I finished top 10 the last 4 weeks. Does that matter?
Well, of course it matters. For me, I want to win. I don't, I'm heavily invested in the sport because I want to win and be competitive and build the top tier elite racing team. So if I didn't think Bubba had the capability of winning, it doesn't matter about any other factors. He wouldn't be part of this team, but he is part of this team because I believe he can win, and I think that he's showing that he's racing our cars to full potential right now, and so that's all I can ask. Hopefully we just continue on this trend because it's certainly what I want to see and what I expected last year, but it's probably was a little much to ask in year one, not only from him but from our race team. These things take time. You can't just it doesn't matter how much money you can throw at this. You cannot just buy wins. You have to put the right people together. That's Joe's slogan, is you win with people, and that takes time to get all those things put together, and it's now starting to come together, and I believe that Bubba's contract and extension with us was definitely well warranted from what I've seen this season, not just including the last 4 weeks.
Okay, Denny, thanks for coming in. Have a
All
great
right, thank
weekend.
you.